So far, the best I can figure out, I have made two mistakes. First, I told you to learn the left-hand scales by reading the bass clef notes on the two-page scale chart. That was a big mistake. Don't do it. I will show you a far better way that avoids ever learning to read the hateful bass clef. Second, as I worked on some of the sessions that follow, I realized that I had not committed myself to showing musically illiterate people how to play by ear. Don't be insulted when I use the word illiterate, because it simply means that you have had no musical training at all. And you have no idea how to read music. If I ignore all those people, I will have eliminated literally millions of people from this program. So the next session's really simple. It's very simple music. It's enough to spend the rest of your life playing by ear if you stick with this, and you'll love every minute of it. If you already think you know how to read music, you should watch all of these sessions, because you will learn a whole new way of looking at music, and not the way that your piano teacher told you. There are two things different about these how to read music sessions. First, there are far too many details involved for me to rely on cue cards, which is what I did in the first sessions. So I had to write the entire script, and I am reading it to you now because I have to, or I could miss dozens and dozens of the important things. Second, I simply had to come up with what you younger folks probably call audio-visual aids, and that's what you call them in a technological age. My technological age is approximately 100 years behind yours. I am simply not able to whip out a laptop, hook up to a Fi-Wi or whatever they call them, and project massive, moving, colorful displays with charts and graphs and talking faces onto your computer screen. My version of video aids is so ancient that some of you may quit in disgust. Hopefully most of you will laugh and give me a little credit for trying so hard. These will be the toughest sessions for beginners, but I repeat, the music you need to read is incredibly simple, and if your IQ exceeds your shoe size, you can do it. It is absolutely essential that you learn the 12 major scales with both hands, because that is the only way that you can develop the dexterity that you have to play the piano at all. And if you want to develop that dexterity, do yourself a favor. If you don't want to develop that dexterity, then quit now. It'll be a total waste of time if you refuse to learn the scales. The beauty of learning the scales is that while your primary goal is to build dexterity, you will automatically be learning how to read the notes on the treble clef, one note at a time, and that is all the reading you will ever need. Yes, there are 88 keys on a piano, but only 12 of them are unique. All the rest are repetitious, and they're in the same order from beginning to end. If you are determined not to learn how to read the simplest of music, playing by ear will prove to be nearly impossible. The only tool you will have will be the tool of listening. Every song has two vital parts: the melody, which is inherently one note at a time, and the chords, which have to be played but not learned several notes at a time. So you encounter a song that you like, and you can't read a note of music. All you can do is listen to it over and over and over again, and finally, after listening to it maybe 30 or 40 times, you may be able to pick out the melody on your piano, and you'll have to be in the same key that it was recorded in. And there are a lot of nasty keys that you can try to play songs on the piano. And all you've learned at that point, after driving yourself nuts listening, is the melody, one note at a time. You still haven't learned any of the chords, and there are hundreds of them that are available that represent the other half of playing music. And even if you were able to unravel those chords, it would take you hundreds of listenings probably to do it. So if you give up now because you refuse to read music at all, you have no other tool but listening, and it simply won't be worth the effort. That's the terrible price of quitting. So please don't quit. Stay to the end of the last session and then decide what you want to do with your life. You will be able to read music sufficiently to play by ear for the rest of your life. Now it's time for what I call my patented audiovisual aids. You are experiencing one of my audio aids by listening to my voice. The other one is next to my easel, and that's the piano, and those are the two audio aids that you get from this program. Having urged you to stick with me on this, I will now use my first high-tech visual aid to show you the ultimate goal of reading simple music. If you know that a finger is also a digit, you know that these aids are simply digitally enhanced, meaning with my fingers. Since I have to focus on the musically illiterate, I will start at the very beginning. Here's number one. And what this is the basic format of all piano music. The top, this is called, well, each one of them is a staff, these five and these five. This is the treble clef, this is the bass clef. The treble clef is for the right hand, basically, and the bass clef is for the left hand. The treble clef has this memorable curly Q, which defines it. And when you read music, you read from left to right. I have no notes on this sheet because that's not the point of what I'm trying to show you. The bass clef is, like I said, for the left hand, and it has this giant comma with two dots. Don't ask me why it has dots, because there's a whole lot of stuff on sheet music that I don't know what it means, and I have no intention of ever learning. Even though half of the sheet music is written for the left hand in the bass clef, and there are two staffs, always together, because of this long vertical line here, that tells you that they're the same music, essentially, right hand, left hand. The problem with the treble clef is that these lines and these spaces do not correspond to the treble clef lines and spaces. For example, on the treble clef, middle C, which is where you're going to start almost everything, is on this line, and I'll show it to you on another sheet. And here it's at the top, but this is C down here. That's the principal C of the left hand. It's an octave lower than middle C. And that's why I hate the bass clef. And if you ever had to learn it, you would hate it also, and you would quit. You will never have to learn it with what I am going to teach you or show you. So I made up a second sheet that shows you what I've essentially accomplished. I'll go back to this one again. Every sheet of music, piano music, that you will ever find, except what I'm going to show you later, has both the treble clef and the bass clef completely separately, and you have to read them both simultaneously. I don't know if you use one eye up here and another eye down here, but they go together, and that's what a sheet of piano music looks like without the notes on it. What I did was exactly the same drawing, and here's the right hand and the treble clef. Here's what used to be the bass clef. It is completely gone, which means that in terms of 99% of the musical sheet music that's ever been written in history using this kind of script, I have eliminated 1/2 of the entire learning process. And that's a fairly decent accomplishment in my judgment, just by itself. You remember what the treble clef looked like? It was 5 lines and 4 spaces. Here's the treble clef sign, here's the 5 lines and the 4 spaces. And here are the keys drawn to scale of a keyboard. When a note is written on the treble clef down here, it's referring to a very specific key up here. So I mentioned middle C to you here, and I told you it was on a line sort of by itself that you have to draw, and it's 6 lines now with that little line there, and there's a note on it. You don't need to worry about exactly what that note means, but it's on the C line, okay? Now, if you follow up from the arrow backwards, there's the C. So this sign on a sheet of paper, sheet music, means that you hit this key. The black ones can have 2 meanings, and I'll explain those later. But this black key is either C sharp or D flat. And if you follow that line down, that's a C sharp and that's a D flat. So everything you see down here, which is all that you'll see for all practical purposes on any piece of sheet music, all you see here, these funny looking things, we call them notes, are simply telling you to hit the key that corresponds to it. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. That's the C scale. Don't ask me why it's not the A scale, because logic would dictate that the simplest scale would be the first one, and it's not. The simplest scale is the C scale, not the A scale. Now, to clarify even further how much I am going to simplify the process of your learning how to play by ear and simplify the reading of simple music, I will show you a relatively typical page of sheet music for the piano. It's not beginner, it's not expert. It is one of about 5 pages in this song. The name of the song is "They Can't Take That Away From Me." It's a wonderful old song that is played by jazz musicians, but it also was a purely popular song in its day. And this is now there's one thing that's untypical about this. I told you there are 2 staffs, 2 clefs, and here are the 2 piano versions, or version, and they're connected here. And imagine having to learn to read those 2, the bottom 2, all across here. It would take me a day to actually figure out those notes on both the treble clef and the bass clef. Bass clef's fairly simple in this. If you get into more complex music, the bass clef, this clef notes are just as bad as these, the treble clef. This one has, and it's it's for people who have an understanding of simple music, and that's what makes this atypical. And that's this top staff. It is also a treble clef. And you will notice that it is simply one note at a time. It corresponds to all this, but that's all it is one note at a time. And these things up here, such as A flat, B flat seventh, E flat sixth, G minor, these letters with symbols, those are actually the chords that go in the bass clef. Well, we're not using the bass clef, and you'll learn those in a much, maybe 5 sessions from now. The only other thing that's still on here are the lyrics, and these notes, well, all of this, both clefs down here, go with the lyrics, but more importantly, these specific lyrics go perfectly with this single line of notes. And that's what you would normally, if you were taking piano lessons, probably in your 5th or 7th year, your piano teacher would be telling you, play this. These two, these two, these two, these two. What you're going to end up doing when this is all over in this course is simply playing that. Now, to show you how much I have simplified your life, I digitally enhanced this next photocopy. It's exactly the same page you just looked at, but I have eliminated everything you don't need to learn. And by eliminating the bass clef, and by eliminating all of the notes that were in the treble clef, dozens and dozens and dozens of them, that same page from that same music now simply is this. So just like I eliminated all of the bass clef in everything, I've also eliminated the complexities that were in the treble clef and reduced the song down to its absolute, that thing's magnetized, absolute most simple format, which is, that's the whole page. Obviously, you will have to learn the chords, but I'll get to that later. I can only tell you that it's 10 times easier than what I'm trying to show you now. And you actually will probably enjoy learning the chords because you'll do it out of a book, literally, that'll show you every note you need to hit. And you can learn them one at a time. So now this is just one line from that same song that includes the lyrics, "We may never, never meet again on thee." This is the treble clef that you would play with regular piano music. This is the bass clef you would play with regular piano music. You would be doing it simultaneously. And that would take me an hour to figure out, literally. I can't read music worth a darn. Now, that's what that looks like. And I copied and enhanced this one, digitally of course, because I was using my fingers. And it's the same exact phrase, except instead of all of this that you have to learn, here's the entire right hand, single notes, one at a time, and here are the chord symbols that will normally appear. This is in the key of C. And that's why these chord symbols are simple. Much more simple than the first sheets of this same song that I showed you, because that was written in E flat, and that's a whole different ballgame. So now you have it. That's the ultimate goal of learning to read what is truly simple music. Once you learn the basics, you will be off and running, creating your own music for the rest of your life, and that's not too bad. So let's learn the basics. I will try to shed some light, first on the scales, then on the keyboard, and finally on a few hateful musical symbols. I will teach you all that, or show you all that I know about reading music. And the knowledge that took me 5 years of dreadful piano lessons to learn. But what I have learned and what little knowledge I have of reading music is more than I need, and I'm nearly 80 years old and I'm still playing the piano by ear and having a 10-ring circus every time I do it. The reason for that goes back to an earlier session when I told you that what is missing from reading music that is so vital in life, really, is creativity. And when all you're doing is reading those complicated sheets, that's literally all you're doing. You are simply doing what you're told. You're hitting the keys exactly the way the composer wanted you to, exactly the way that your teacher wants you to, and exactly the way that justifies your teacher charging you an arm and a leg to teach you how to do it. He can't teach you to do this. And this is the same music, it's just incredibly easier to play. So we begin with basic 2-page chart of all the major chords. And this is where you have to start. And there's 2 sheets. This one has the G major scale. Here's the treble clef up here. Well, you won't have to pretend, because in a moment I got rid of it for you. This is the G major scale. Now there's one sharp in the G major scale, and it happens to be F, and it's shown right at the very beginning. The D major scale has 2 sharps. The A major scale has 3 sharps. E major has 4 sharps, and God forbid, B major has 5 sharps, which playing in the key of B is an unmitigated nightmare. But that's what's on this sheet, C major plus every scale that has a sharp in it. And this will come up later. It's important to remember that those sharps, we're only talking about when they appear at the very beginning of a staff or at the what you know is the very beginning of a song. And every song that you can find in any kind of piano music, including what I am going to show you, that's where those symbols will be right at the beginning. If they turn up in the middle, that's a whole different subject. But since they're shown here at the beginning, you know that they apply. This is F sharp. They apply to every F that you have to play. And that's why when you come to an F here, which is this number 4, I'll explain that in a minute, that would be a sharp. Not a plain F, but a sharped F. But he doesn't have to show it on the interior of the music, because it tells you that the entire music is written in the key of G major. This is a little off the subject, but If you look at a keyboard, and this, like I said, this is drawn to scale, so you can do it yourself if you have to. And you play all 13 notes in a row, and we'll start with C. You end up going either up, or if you start up here, going down. You end up with 13 times you hit the piano. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 is actually the same as 1. It's just an octave higher. Or if you started up here and counted down, this would be an octave lower. That's called a chromatic scale. And it's not anything that you need to worry about. That it's totally different from the major scale. The major scale has its own pattern. Every one of them does, and I'm going to explain it. But for future uses, you need to realize that if you just go from this key to this key, the F key on the piano and the F, let's call it the F sharp key on the piano, that's called a half step. Okay, and there's a reason I'm explaining this. It'll come up much later. If you skip one and go to here, that's called a whole step. And that applies across the entire piano. What's weird about it is that when you go from B to C, it's all these are white keys, and if you go from C to D, it's a whole step, a whole step. From G to A is a whole step, this is a whole step. But these two keys and these two keys, they're only a half step apart. That has something to do with music theory, which I don't know and I don't want to know, and I'm incapable of teaching you. And I will always be incapable of teaching you. So now you understand steps, and the thing that makes B and C and E and F somewhat different, because they're not whole steps. They're white keys, but they're not whole steps, they're half steps. So this is key of C major scale and all the scales that have sharps in them. This next page are all of the major scales that have flats in them. Let me get this out of the way. And that's what the keys that you can play in, the scales of those keys. This is F major, 1 flat. B flat major has 2 flats. E flat major has 3 flats. A flat major has 4 flats. D flat major has 5. G. This one we'll talk about separately. It says that it has 6 flats, and if you look at a keyboard, you'll notice there's only 5 black keys. I have a lot of trouble taking the number 6 and trying to translate it into 5. In any event, a flat symbol, you know, the sharp symbol looked like a little tic-tac-toe game. 2 vertical lines and 2 horizontal lines, except it's just kind of bent and points up on the right. The B symbol looks like a lowercase letter B, except it comes to a point at the bottom. And a sharp symbol means that you go up a half step from the white key that it's referring to, and a flat means that you go down a half step from whatever key is referenced, whatever white key is referenced. So those rules are the same, except the sharp you're going up and the flat you're going down. And for the reasons that I explained, you'll never see an F flat on a sheet of paper because F flat is the same as the white E key. F is white, E is white. And there's only a half step in between them, so there can't really be a half step. And so there's no such thing as a F flat. The same is true of B, except it's the opposite. Next to B going up is the white key C. B and C are both white keys. And so there can't be a B sharp because the B sharp up a half step is the white C key. The only key that has no sharps and no flats, and the reason if you're like me, you'll end up spending most of your life playing in it, and that's the C scale. I know this may sound overwhelming, but it's really not that difficult. I don't think you need to be a rocket scientist to figure out what this is all about. Now, in my zeal to simplify everything in your life as far as music is concerned, I will show you the same two sheets, which are the C and the sharp scales, and then all the flat scales, on what I have digitally enhanced. And I've eliminated all of these notes of the bass clef. You never have to learn those. The only thing that remains complete is the treble clef. This actually sheet has this written on it, C major. I'll explain that in a second. This is the treble curlicue. And you remember I told you about the sharps and flats that appear at the very beginning, telling you what key you're in? Because this is C major, there are no sharps and there are no flats. So this circle here is empty. There's nothing to tell you. So you know when you see that, if this is all you saw of a sheet of music, you would know that whatever it is, it's played in the key of C, and it uses the C scale. And here's what makes these two sheets so important. This thing keeps attaching itself. This shows the notes of the C scale. If you have any doubt in your mind what that is, you should notice that it's on a new line that's right below the 5 lines of the staff. We talked about it earlier. That's this middle C. And so you know that note, what key it refers to. There's D, E, F, G, A, B, C. That's the whole scale. And then you go down, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. And if you have any doubt in your minds as to what key you're supposed to hit, you go to this sheet again, you find there's middle C. You see where this black spot is? Same place. And you look above it, and it says to hit that key on the piano. Well, you can find that key on the piano without any trouble at all. And so you know that's where you start. And since the key, actually that scale is all white keys, it's incredibly simple. But what is important is that I have also left the numbers, and these numbers are what I call finger numbers. One happens to be your thumb. I realize that's not a finger. And you use your thumb on the first note on the C, then your index finger, then your middle finger. And here's 1 again. Well, you can't go like this. So logically, to hit this thumb a second time from here, you just go underneath and hit the F with your thumb again. And then you go 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm sorry the numbers are so small, but that's how they made them. So you use all of your fingers and you use your thumb twice to do the C scale, just going up. And then going down, you do the same thing, except in reverse. You start with 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then the 3, your middle finger goes over top of your thumb to the E, then you play the D with your second finger, and you're back to your thumb on the note that's C. This is the major chord of the C scale, or this key of C, and it's these 3 notes. And that's why I said earlier that when you play, when you learn the melody, you are learning and playing one note at a time. When you learn the chords, you're going to learn them one note at a time, and it even gives you which fingers to use: thumb, middle finger, and pinky. But you're going to play them at the same time. That's what makes them chords as opposed to melody. Okay, now let's go to the G scale. Oh no, I skipped the most important part. These are for the left hand. This is the bass clef that I have eliminated. But I left the numbers because these are the ones you use, the fingers and thumb that you use to play the same scale, the C scale, with your left hand. Now, how are you going to learn the notes on the piano of this? Well, at the very beginning, we had a test to find out if you were tone deaf. And if you are tone deaf and you flunked either of those tests, or particularly the first one, but if you're convinced that you're tone deaf, you shouldn't even be here now. So you can recognize the similarity of notes, and the test went like this: are these the same? That's an octave. That's a perfect octave. They sound the same for some reason that only a college professor could explain, probably. But the point is that you know from learning this exactly what a scale is supposed to sound like. So when you look at doing it with your left hand, all you have to do is hear it, and you can pick out, you're going to do it an octave lower than the right hand. You're going to start an octave lower and play what you heard yourself playing up here, except play it with your left hand. If that is not enough, then play it with your right hand again, one note at a time, and after each note, find the note that is exactly the same, an octave lower, and play that. And sooner or later, you'll know exactly what the notes are, the keys that need to be hit in the treble clef, with the left hand, I should say, to play this scale. Oh, something I want to say there. So, I managed to leave these numbers because they are important, and I'll show you in a moment how bizarre this gets. But here, with your left hand, you start an octave lower, use your pinky is on the C, and then D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and then back down again. And it's exactly the same. It's just one octave lower, and you don't need to learn to read these notes to play that. So let's look at the next one, because it's G major. And G major is the only key and the only scale that has one sharp. And I know I mentioned this earlier, but that's where it appears. So you know it's a treble clef. You know that F sharp is you're in the key of G because it only has one sharp, and that sharp is the F. And then we get to 4/4, which is what's called the time. And that one I'm going to have to explain, and I have a visual aid to do it with. But matter of fact, I may have two of them. So, let's see, where am I? After you've learned this over and over and over again with your right hand, then and only then should you start with your left hand and learn it, and learn it slower, as slow as it takes, until you can play that scale with these fingers and this scale, the same scale, with these fingers. And then you start playing them together, both hands at the same time. Because music, the melody and the chords go together. And so your fingers have to work together, and you have to build the dexterity by doing this. So you end up playing them together very, very slowly at first, and then go faster, and then go a little faster than that, and just keep going until you can play the C scale with both hands at the same time pretty quickly. That's when you move on to the next scale, which is the G major. I've explained the treble, the single sharp, which is F sharp. The 4/4 time I will explain later. You don't have to learn any of the notes in this clef, but you have to do them your left hand with these numbers. They may be identical to the left hand up here. They may be different. And some of them are very, very different. So you learn this in the right hand, the G major scale, using the F sharp, which is here and here. And until you can do it pretty briskly with your right hand, then you very slowly pick out the left hand. You don't need to know the notes on the sheet music, and build that faster and faster until you're comfortable with it, and start playing them together very slowly, and then speed up and just keep going. And we do it again, here, here, and here. I'll get to that in a moment. This is the D major scale, and it has two sharps, which means that everywhere that you encounter a C or an F, you go up a half step. Even though it doesn't show a sharp next to the note, you're compelled to do that through the whole song because of those. At the very beginning, it says that. And it tells you, in effect, that you're in D major. Again, you don't have to learn the notes of the scale down here on the left hand, but you use these numbers. Up here, you learn the notes and the numbers, which is pretty automatic with the treble clef. A major has three flat sharps, and it's those three. And what you end up with is a total of 12 major scales. Remember, the chromatic scale had 13 notes. Well, 13 notes is the C at the top is a duplicate of the C at the bottom, etc. Whatever notes you start with. So you don't really have 13 major scales, because the one that starts up higher is the same as the one that starts lower. 7 of those scales start on white keys, because there are 7 white keys. All the rest are duplicates that are white. and 5 start on the black keys, because there's only 5 black keys. These are the flat scales or keys that you play in. They're exactly the same format, only dealing with the treble clef. This first one is F, the key of F, which means that it has 1 flat. That tells you it's the key of F. This also tells you that the flatted key is B. So every B flat in here, and there's only 1, you hit the key the black key a half step lower. There's the time again. Here's the finger numbers that you use, and here are the actual keys, the notes on the keyboard, after you translate them to how I showed you to do that. This one is B flat major. There's 2 flats, B flat and E flat. You learn the fingers and the notes and learn the scale. Once you've accomplished that successfully, you do the left hand, and there's the note, the key, the fingers, but there's no notes to learn because you're going to figure it out for yourself. Here's E flat major. It has 3 flats, B, E, and A. Here's A flat major. And this is my favorite in terms of the left hand. And you may not be able to see these numbers very clearly, but the fact is, this entire, remember the C scale, you used your thumb twice and all 5 fingers. You used your index finger twice, your middle finger twice. But you ended up using every single finger you have, including your thumb. This A flat major is bizarre because with your left hand, which is this one down here, and maybe with your, I guess it's your right hand too, both hands, you never use either your 4th finger or your pinky. The only keys you can use to play that scale are your middle finger, your index finger, and your thumb. So you end up playing a whole scale this way, just those 3. And that's pretty weird, and that gives you an idea of how different the numbering is for your fingers on both of these sheets. The irony is that all of them have, or many of them, are different fingering, and the reason they are is because of the black keys. You can easily go from one white key to another, and it doesn't matter which one you start with. I mean, it'd be awfully hard to go from your pinky to your thumb. You just couldn't do it. But when you get into the sharps and flats, the keys are positioned in such a way that you have to start with something other than your thumb, or you'll get so tangled up, and you'll soon learn that it's virtually impossible to play many of these scales by starting with your thumb like you do with the C scale. And that's just the painful lesson of it's your fingers versus the black and white keys. I left this out, I left it in. You can play it or not. And that's the G flat major, because it says right here at the beginning, you're in the treble clef, that it has 6 flats, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Of those flats, one of them is C flat. Now, if you look at a keyboard and you remember the steps, half steps, whole steps, there is no C flat. C flat is the white key B. But instead of calling it B, they can't. They have to call it C flat, and it makes no sense, and it's just absurd. But I'm not in charge, and I didn't do this stuff, and some idiot did it hundreds of years ago. And why he did it that way, I'll never know. The steps and half steps. And that's because every major scale has exactly the same pattern. I probably better get that sheet out again. It doesn't matter what key you're in. It doesn't matter if it's the scale in D flat or F sharp or B or G. Every single major scale has this same pattern. You start out with, I think they call it the tonic, which is this in the C. If you're in the key of C, C is the tonic, I think. That's your first note, you play it with your thumb. But here's the pattern of all scales, no matter where you start. From the beginning first note, which is the key the scale is in, you go a whole step to the next note, C to D. Then you go another whole step to E. Then you go a half step. Then you go another whole step, another whole step, another whole step, and you end with a half step. And let's take the scale of B flat. Here's B flat. So you start on this key, and it starts out a whole step, a whole step, a half step, a whole step, a whole step, a whole step, and a half step. So if you really are in trouble and you're trying to remember the scale, either hand, left or right, not worrying about the fingering, just worrying about what keys do I hit. And you're trying to do E flat, just remember that same pattern is always the same. Whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. It works like a charm. We're finally back to this, which I consider the most important of all the visual aids. I'm sorry, my digitally enhanced visual aids, because it shows you the most fundamentally important thing, that everything you see on a line of sheet music like this, don't worry about whether they're sharps or flats, or whether they're solid white or dark. Everything on this treble clef relates to a specific white or black key on this actual keyboard. You can draw this yourself in the privacy of your own home. All you need is a ruler and a sheet of paper and a pen. And this is the exact size of a white key. This is the exact size of a black key, both directions. After you do that, then you have to draw the treble clef down here, and I'm not sure how you can put these on there if you're a true beginner. Tune in, repeat looking at this, and that will tell you what these are. You don't even have to know what they are. If you put it up here, it tells you there that this is G. That's the second line from the bottom. And that this C is the second space from the top. This E is the last line I'm sorry. Yeah, that's F. See how bad I am? The top line is F. And this if you don't have any other visual aid, that's the one that's most important, I think, for a beginner. So if you can't find this anyplace on the internet or in a music store, if you're resigned to having to draw it yourself, you need to draw it yourself. And if nothing else, find a friend who reads a little bit of music and let them fill in the circles, whether they be black or white, on this treble clef down here. It's extremely important, though, when you work with this sheet, that you remember that these notes, the black keys, can have two different names, in this case F sharp and G flat, and they show up on paper as either this is G flat, no, I'm sorry, that's F sharp at the bottom, and it's the last space from the bottom. Or it would be, if it's a G flat because you're playing in a flatted scale, it would be written here, and the G, the note itself would be on G, and it would show the little flat. So don't forget that.